Hello, my name is Greg Lane. I want to take a few moments in this video to discuss a new and proven methodology that is basically to help companies reach breakthrough objectives. And naturally, that entails an awareness of culture and a change of culture. And this needs to be done at an organizational level. I'm pretty excited about this because over the last few years, I've been trialing this method in a number of companies, and we've had some great results. The method is published in a book called Culturally on Plan that details what needs to be done, and it's captured the success of how this has worked in other organizations. The predominant question is probably to consider why this method and why this book. What's different? And I think one of the things is that starts off with what I call the other guy syndrome. So I've been involved in changing organizations and improving their cultures over 25 years, and I've worked in 30 odd countries. And one thing that always comes up is, again, what I call the other guy syndrome. And the way I would describe that is everyone really feels their beliefs, their traits are what's made them successful or brought them to the level where they are, and they're always looking over their shoulder feeling it's the other guy that needs to change. And the other guy also has the same beliefs, and he's looking over his or her shoulder to the other guy, and so forth and so on. And this method goes through and really helps create a non-biased self-awareness through the entire team of what needs to change to line up with the breakthrough objectives. So let me just quickly outline the method in the book. And it starts with strategic deployment. And most people don't do that properly. And I'll give you an example on the next slide of how this book goes through and talks about what the true definition of deploying your strategy means and the human emotions and the human connection to that. Once that's done, there's really the second step of evolving a cultural transformation plan. This isn't randomly sending a few people to leadership or coaching training and hoping for the best. This is an organizational-wide cultural plan. And that entails some sub-steps, of course. The first thing you need to do is assess the desired traits and behaviors you need to reach your breakthrough objectives. So everything goes back to and is tied to the strategy. So what different traits do we need? What different behaviors? Again, breakthrough objectives normally require that type of change in the culture. And then we need, at an individual level, in a non-biased way, to understand our own traits and behaviors. Most of us judge those completely wrong. It's known that people are not good at assessing their own personalities, and there are many non-biased ways to do that and get people convinced of the need for change. And then obviously their traits and awarenesses at an individual level and very privately can be compared to what has been determined the organization needs. And then we need practical ideas to work on changing those traits and behaviors. And those are proven to change more in adulthood than childhood. I've documented many successes of it, and the book talks about how we can go about doing that in a very practical and pragmatic way. So let me quickly move on and just give you a few examples. Let's just start with the strategic deployment. Here's what typically happens. We look at all kinds of tools and various strategy deployments like the X Matrix and so forth. And all of these have valuable inputs into developing the strategy. The text in the book describes some different methods that involve some more human interactions and flush out more ideas and actions and involve more people and departments in reaching objectives and therefore creating much more successful outcomes. So for example, the X Matrix is a very helpful tool to relate connections or relationships between objectives and key projects or key projects and the goals, or between the goals and the annual objectives. And a typical X Matrix looks like what you see on the slide in front of you. The problem with this is it becomes a tick-the-box exercise, putting in these triangles and squares and X's to indicate the level of relationships is not quite as good as a simple post-it pad matrix where we have our objectives across the top, 5 or 6 key objectives for the year, our overall objectives and metrics, how the company is going to measure that, and then each department gets involved in identifying where they have influence or control. And that's what flushes out a lot more actions and different measurements. So we need to go down to this level. Again, it's a dynamic created in the environment. Let me give you one more example, although there's a lot when we look at management moving to leadership, when we talk about leading without power, nonverbals, and so forth. But let me just jump to one other example that talks about our intuitive versus analytical thinking. And one practical idea is what's called feedback analysis. We want to use what was developed by a German in the 14th century called feedback analysis to help us understand when we should be using intuitive versus analytical thinking. Everything in a cultural transformation comes back to making better decisions via better decision makers. Okay? Feedback analysis is simply noting our hypotheses at the time we discover them or make them, and then months later going back and reviewing those against the actual results and trying on our own level to learn about our decision-making abilities, where we've been correct and where we haven't. And that is one example out of many talked about in this methodology and shared in this book. But again, what I don't want is, you don't need to take my word for it. Let's look at what other corporate leaders have to say. As this book's been out, it's been endorsed by some major companies that are very excited and moving forward. Whirlpool, for example, believes their directors and leaders believe the book gives the reader a solid approach to move ahead, and they're eager in trying some of the ideas in their organization. La-Z-Boy, it jumps to the level of changing behaviors, and that's fundamentally what we need to do at an individual level. Northrop Grumman believes it's a book to be used. This is a guidebook. This is not a feel-good book. This is a book to tell you how to get there with a proven methodology that's been developed over a number of years. It doesn't just have to be in manufacturing. Let's look at Schlumberger, an international company, and one of their divisions, M.I. Schwacko, in the support services for offshore and onshore oil drilling, talking about how it's a wonderful indictment on a methodical and yet subtle awareness of an individual's culture and the influence that has on their decision making. And it can facilitate a solid and profitable strategic objective alignment. And let's look at one more. Australia, the defense industry. Here we're looking at various companies involved in various businesses, service companies like the Material Technology Center, established in Australia, where their chairman is saying whatever business, whether it's manufacturing or service, this is an essential guidebook. I recommend that you consider this. The guidebook is being offered at a discount starting in mid-February 2013 at strategic-leaders.com, and you'll be able to purchase it there. Thank you for your time.